Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a super fascinating and honestly, maybe slightly unnerving journey straight into the control center of your entire life. Yeah, we're talking about your brain. Our goal here is to reveal the hidden glitches in human cognition. We're going to look at the exact mechanisms that cause our minds to take shortcuts, totally filter out reality, and sometimes completely hijack our behavior without us even realizing it. So, I want to start things off by asking you a really serious question. Can you truly trust your own mind? I mean, look out at the world right now. You probably feel like you're experiencing this seamless, totally objective, high-definition live stream of reality, right? Your decisions feel rational, your memories feel accurate. But what if I told you that your perception is actually less like a perfect video recording and way more like a hastily drawn sketch that's just continuously updated and repeatedly overwritten? Okay, let's dive into this. The truth is, evolution absolutely did not design our brains to be perfect recording devices. It designed them to keep us alive. Processing every single tiny detail of the world around us, that takes a massive amount of mental energy. So, to survive, our brains learn to prioritize speed and efficiency over a perfect, objective recording of reality. We are quite literally biologically wired to take shortcuts. And look, while those shortcuts kept our ancestors alive, they create some massive blind spots for us in the modern world. And, cognitive science has actually been systematically dismantling this illusion of our perfect perception for over a century and a half. Back in 1850, physicist Hermann von Helmholtz first proposed that the brain operates through what he called unconscious inference. Basically, our brain is just guessing at the world based on limited sensory input. Fast forward a bit to 1995, and psychologist Daniel Goleman popularizes the amygdala hijack, showing how our emotions can completely override our logic. Then, in 1997, Ronald Rensink introduces the flicker paradigm, proving our eyes can miss massive changes right in front of us. And jumping right up to 2024, researchers like Tobias H. Donner are literally mapping how confirmation bias operates in real time inside our neural networks.
Which brings us to part one, when emotion takes control.
Have you ever, say, totally snapped at someone in traffic, or maybe fired off a blistering, angry email, only to sit back a few minutes later and wonder, whoa, what just came over me? Well, psychologist Daniel Goleman named this exact phenomenon. He called it the amygdala hijack. This is an emotional overreaction to stress that triggers your body's fight or flight response, completely disabling rational thought. You see, early humans really needed this. If a saber-toothed tiger jumped out at you, you didn't have time to sit there and ponder your options, right? You just needed to run. But today, modern psychological threats, like a super tight deadline or a snarky comment from a coworker, they trick our ancient survival instincts into launching that exact same primal response. And this brilliantly illustrates the biological battle happening right inside your head. You essentially have two main players here. First, the amygdala. These are the almond-shaped cell clusters at the base of your brain. The amygdala is fast, it's emotional, and it's totally automatic. It senses a threat and immediately pumps stress hormones, like cortisol and adrenaline, right into your bloodstream. On the other side, you have the frontal lobes. This is the rational, deliberate, reasoning part of your cerebral cortex. During a hijack, the amygdala essentially pulls the fire alarm and completely shuts down those frontal lobes. Your reasoning center is just locked out. This massive chemical dump causes some really intense physical changes. We're talking rapid heartbeats, sweaty palms, clammy skin, even goosebumps. Your airways expand, your pupils dilate, and blood rushes straight to your muscles. Your body is literally ready to physically fight a predator to the death. But instead, you're just sitting in a Tuesday morning staff meeting. Once the hormones finally clear and your frontal lobes come back online, you're usually just left with a heavy dose of embarrassment and regret over your modern-day overreaction.
All right, moving on to part two, seeing is not believing.
So our emotions create a massive blind spot, right? But what about our actual physical eyes? Well, that brings us to the concept of change blindness. And to give this some academic weight, let's look at the groundbreaking work of Ronald Rensink, James Clark, and Kevin O'Regan from the 1990s. Rensink noted that, quote, large changes that occur in clear view of an observer can become difficult to notice if made during an eye movement, blink, or other such disturbance. Basically, if there's even a tiny interruption in your vision, a massive change can happen right in front of your face and your brain simply won't register it. No way, right? But it's true. We so often compare our eyes to a high-definition video camera. But that is entirely wrong. Attention is not a high-def camera. It's a narrow flashlight in a dark forest. We only actually perceive the very small, specific patch of the world that we shine our mental light on at any given moment. Everything else, It's just context and memory that our brain stitches together to make us feel like we're seeing the whole picture. Let's move to and see how this builds when researchers turn this into an actual scientific test. They use something called the flicker paradigm to prove this exact point. It's a really simple 3-step method. Step 1, they show an observer an initial image. Step 2, they insert a brief blank screen, maybe just for a fraction of a second, to represent a visual disruption, kind of like a blink. Step 3, they show an altered image. And what they find is that unless your flashlight of attention was pointed exactly at the specific object that changed, you will almost certainly miss it. Now, if you're sitting there thinking you're way too smart to fall for this, consider this shocking fact. In a famous medical study, researchers took highly trained radiologists and asked them to review lung CT scans. But the researchers artificially inserted a picture of a gorilla into the scans. A whopping 80% of these highly trained experts completely missed the gorilla. 80%. Why? Well, because their attention was so intensely locked on searching for the specific visual signature of tumors, their brains literally filtered out the unexpected anomaly entirely. And honestly, this happens in pop culture all the time too. Film editors rely on change blindness constantly. Like, for example, in one scene in Harry Potter, a very prominent white napkin completely vanishes between shots, and most viewers, they never notice it. Our brains are tuned to track emotional cues and dialogue. We happily let continuity errors slip right by because our brains value the narrative coherence of the story way, way more than perfect visual tracking. Which leads us perfectly into part 3, blinded by our beliefs. So our brain lies to us about our emotions. It lies to us about our vision, but it also filters our beliefs. To really understand this, neuroscientists Hame Park and Tobias H. Donner use magnetoencephalography, which is basically a super advanced way of measuring brain activity, to watch what happens when people are presented with visual evidence that directly contradicts a choice they just made. Now, what's really interesting about this is they discovered a profound disconnect between information encoded, which is the perfectly accurate neural data, and information readout, which is biased by pre-existing beliefs. The parietal cortex actually perfectly records the contradictory facts. Your brain sees the truth perfectly. But the brain's readout, how it actually uses that information for behavior, is heavily biased by what the person already believes. The data here reveals a really stark contrast. When the evidence presented is consistent with a person's preceding choice or belief, it has a high impact on their choice. The brain accepts it eagerly. But when the evidence is inconsistent with their beliefs, it has an incredibly low impact. It's essentially ignored. Think about that for a second. Even though the brain's hardware perfectly encoded the contradictory evidence, the brain actively applied a confirmation bias to selectively filter it out of the decision-making process. Your brain is literally hiding the truth from you just to protect your ego. Okay, deep breath. Part 4, taking back your mind. I know. That all sounds a little bit grim, doesn't it? But we aren't just helpless victims to our neural wiring. There's a massive silver lining in that PubMed study. The researchers noted that because perfectly encoded contradictory evidence means it's physically stored in your parietal cortex, well, it's actually in there. It isn't lost. And this means we have room for deliberative control. Because the truth is perfectly encoded, you possess the biological capability to access it and counteract those confirmation biases. You just have to slow down enough to let your reasoning center actually access it. So the crucial point is implementing a system to override these automatic glitches. If you feel an amygdala hijack coming on, you absolutely can stop it. Step 1, acknowledge your body's physical response. Literally notice your heart racing or your palms sweating. Step 2, slow your breathing down to a natural rhythm. This physically sends a signal to your brain that the threat is gone. And step 3, consciously activate your frontal cortex by thinking logically about your response options. By using mindfulness and these 3 steps, you can purposefully deactivate the automatic amygdala and hand the keys right back to your rational mind. Our brains are these incredibly efficient, absolutely beautiful engines, but they do cut corners to save energy. They jump to emotional conclusions, they blur our vision to focus our attention, and they selectively filter facts to protect our beliefs. So I want to leave you with this lingering question. Knowing your brain cuts corners, how will you look at your own decisions tomorrow? The next time you feel absolutely 100% certain about an argument or certain about exactly what you just saw, take a breath. Shine your mental flashlight a little bit wider and dare to ask yourself, what might I be missing? Thank you so much for exploring the mind with me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.